Okay, we're recording.
So welcome everybody to our seance, which is a blending of wine and spirits in whatever spelling that you want to use with that. I really like to play on words. And today we're talking about the future of work, part 2. And I want to thank Perry for hosting these new ideas that people bring forward. And it was popular enough last week that we're doing it again this week. So we have 3 speakers. We're going to begin, as you saw in the newsletter, with Bruce Matichuk. He's going to talk about artificial intelligence. And then we're going to go to Dale. He's going to talk about measures of success and taking that humanist approach. And then finish off with Laura-Belle, who is going to walk us through viewing now from the future. So all different ways of taking a look at what we need to know from the future, what we could or should be doing now. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Bruce to speak first. For those of you that are new to Zoom, if you want to have all of us on the screen in the gallery view, that's one thing. You can also go in the top right-hand corner and pick speaker view. So just take a look. Oh, and plus we're going to load up some slides. So when the slides come up, by definition, the slides will be predominant. So all of those things, I'm not sure, Bruce, if you did have some slides. So
yeah, I've got slides, but Claire has to enable presenting.
So maybe just take a technical moment there to get those ready. And then I'll just leave it with the panelists to introduce themselves, take their 10 minutes. I know we'll start waving at the time limit, and then we'll just ease into the next person. So Bruce, if you want to introduce Dale and just hand it over to him seamlessly. And then we'll save all our questions for the end, and we'll pick up where we, what are we hearing from all the panelists? What's sort of the theme? And as we saw last week, the conversation with this group of 20, 25 people is so robust, so exciting to see where it's going to go. And we'll, as Perry just said, we'll finish at 5:30, and we'll ask for more panelists if that's an idea for the next time. It's just a super interesting conversation. So I'm happy you're all here. And we'll hand it over to Bruce to take us into the future of work with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so host disabled participant screen sharing. So I'm not able to share my screens yet.
One more technical try.
Says on mine that. Try it now.
All right.
You on?
So yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
All right. So I'll just throw that. Okay. Can everybody see my screen all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I added a title, but just before I start, Perry, you know that people that had trouble with the URL, they're not actually in the session. So just wanted to point that out. I had a little bit of trouble finding the URL, but so for future reference, so what I added.
Bruce, the URL for everybody. The URL appears in the newsletter.
Oh, well, there we go.
So it's the lead, right in the lead banner. Okay.
Excellent. I'll check that out next time. All right. So what I added is I added a little tag, the age of AI ML, and I'm an AI person. So there's a picture of me and my lovely wife. And my background is in computing science. I've co-founded and been the CTO of a bunch of AI companies, starting back in the 90s. I've had patents. I've done projects for Fortune 500 companies. I funded a lab at the U of A. I'm currently doing Health Gauge, so a little advertisement. So that's my Health Gauge device. Randy and I started this company. We recently took it public, and so we're on the stock exchange now. And our public company is AIML Innovations. So interesting stock ticker for us. And I've also I've worked on a camera recognition AI. So that's just a little bit about my background. So I like to talk about AI, and my perspective is that the AI ML singularity is here. It's now, today. And what that means is that this is the elimination of work as we know it. Why? Because AI systems can do a lot of kinds of jobs that currently people are doing. And what that ultimately leads to is what I would call the new work, And so what is the new work? What are the kinds of skills that people really need to be able to have in this new environment? So we'll start with the AI/ML Singularity is here. And really why it's here is because we have the sufficient, I would call it sufficiently good AI to be able to do a lot of the things that people do today. There's massive computing power. We have cloud computing. We have powerful AI/ML algorithms, and that's leading to what I would call a significant shift in corporate value. Companies that use AI and apply AI, these are the companies that are the fastest growing companies and companies with the most amount of capital available. So you look at Apple, it's a $2 trillion company, largely an AI company, Microsoft, IBM, and it's leading to a replacement of jobs. It's a massive market. So if you just follow Moore's law, you can see this gradual trend, and we're continuing on this trend. Some fun facts. This is a Cray from the 80s, 1.9 gigaflops. This is an iPhone, 5 teraflops, 10,000 times faster. Here's an Xbox. This is a gaming system, 12 teraflops. This is a chip that just came out or a card just came out on the market, 100 teraflops. This is a new chip that just emerged last year.
Wow.
The Cerebras wafer scale engine chip, 3,000 teraflops. So all in one chip. But when you look at these bigger machines, look at the tremendous power. So this is IBM Summit, and the IBM Summit is dwarfed by the Fugaku machine from Japan at 415,000 teraflops. So the processing of these systems is just staggering, and it's leading to systems that can do things that are just simply impossible for humans. So it's not only are we at the singularity point, we're well past the singularity point in many areas. So it's an interesting curve that just shows the march of technology. So this is an exponential curve. Actually, it's called a log curve, log curve, and you can see this tremendous growth in computing over time. So some of you have seen, if you've seen my past talks, I had we are here over there, but I'm crossing that out now, and it's over here. That we are past this point of computer performance. So AI is winning. So we can see it winning in image recognition, face recognition, medical diagnosis. There was a recent result from DeepMind where they had AlphaFold, if you saw it, where actually they built an AI system that can fold proteins, which many people thought that we would never have a machine that had that level of intelligence. Natural language understanding, machine translation. We're using a bunch of this AI inside of Health Coach, which is a product that we're bringing out to the market, which will help people with health issues, and a conversational agent basically for health. And so there's just so many areas in which AI is winning. These are just some fun slides I'm going to show you about some things that AI is doing right now that you may not have seen. If you've been to some of my other AI talks, you would see some of these are repeats. So these faces don't exist. These are actually generated by an algorithm called a generative adversarial network algorithm that can actually make up faces on the fly. There's a nice URL you can go to. This person does not exist, and it'll generate a brand new face for you of somebody that looks like a person. So we also have these algorithms that can take images from one style, make them into another style. It can make it creative. You can add multiple styles from different artists and create truly imaginative and interesting art. This is a great example of GPT-3, where it's actually able to write text. And when you read this text, you can't tell that it was written by a machine. Machine wrote this text. And now what we're seeing is content generation sites come out where you can just generate content for your business by a machine, right? So and actually we use GPT-3 inside of Health Gauge to generate responses to people when they make queries about their health. These images are generated by a machine through a text interface. So basically you can ask DALL-E, which is a program built by OpenAI. You can ask DALL-E for any image and it will generate an image for you on the fly, on demand. This is a really interesting image because this talks about the generation of software. So an AI system was asked to observe someone playing Pac-Man, and after playing for several hours, the AI wrote all the software to replace the Pac-Man game. And so this is another area where AI is taking over jobs. So in the Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum, I posted the URL there. It's a really, really great report talking about the future of jobs. And what they're really saying is that by 2025, which is very soon, jobs will change radically. We'll have millions of jobs will be displaced, and we'll have many new kinds of roles that will emerge. And really the theme there is change, 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 change. 43% of businesses surveyed indicate that they're going to reduce their workforce. 41% of the businesses said that they plan to expand their use of contractors for task specialized work. So what's happening is, as jobs get eliminated, we end up with people having to have very specific expertise in order to remain employable. And where you will work is not just simply in your local environment. You will work all over the world virtually with your specific skills. And job creation is slowing while job destruction is accelerating. 84% of employers are rapidly this new word, digitalizing work processes. And what we're seeing is the significant expansion of remote work. So there's a lot of talk about upskilling and reskilling right now, because people just simply need to learn to do new things, and they're going to need to learn to do things continuously in this new environment. So so here's a list of the top skills required in the age of AI. This is Bernard Marr, who's a very famous AI lecturer. He came up with this list and I really like it. So very quickly, creativity and imagination. Creativity is what you will require to survive in this new environment. And the reason is because machines, they're somewhat creative, but they have a limited amount of creativity. So we still need people who are creative. You need to be able to create, to be able to work in this new environment. We still need analytical and critical thinking. This is the key. You need to be able to identify, evaluate, and analyze, describe things, doing decision-making. Basically, machines need that human judgment, and they can assist, but they can't take these analysis tasks all the way in the way that humans can. What we see is emotional intelligence is really important. Machines are just not emotional, and you need this emotional intelligence to be able to create coherence among groups. What we see is that interpersonal communication skills will be absolutely essential. This is related, obviously, to the emotional intelligence, but when we're communicating, we have tone, we have body language, we have other things. Machines don't have bodies, right? And so these are things that are just uniquely human skills. We need active learning with this growth mindset. Machines can't adapt the way that people can. We need good judgment and decision-making, because machines just have limited decision-making capability. And so leadership is important, leadership skills. What's happening is companies as a whole are becoming non-hierarchical, with many projects with remote teams. Everything is online, and machines just simply can't lead. You need to become much more sensitive to diversity. Our company, our little tiny Healthgate company, more than half of our workers are overseas. Workplace is more diverse. We have diverse teams. And it's hard for machines to really understand and be able to take advantage of the of diversity in the workplace. And people need to embrace change. Change is the norm. It's light speed, and flexibility is key. And the problem with AI is you have to maintain it. If you need to change it, it has to be adapted by people. So that's it for my talk. So would love to hear from people and love to get your comments.
Thanks, Bruce. We'll save the comments for at the end, and we'll also share this out with, as Perry said, through the video. So there's lots of cool things that you've got in the presentation there, Bruce, that hopefully if we don't get questions later, we'll refer back to your slides. So let's hand it over to Dale and see how we can transition from the world of AI and the future of work to Dale's perspective. More holistic, I think, is a way of expressing Dale's focus. And he's just, oh, Bruce, stop sharing your slides. There we go. Okay, perfect. And Dale, you're still on mute.
Have I shared my screen?
You're fine. We can see it. Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Bruce, and welcome to Humanizing the Great Reset. I've been involved with the venture to venture, I would say, for many years now, starting with working with people in the Indigenous community in development of businesses for Samson Management, looking at being involved with Asante Wealth Management and addressing administration of wealth management. I've also been advocate and member developer for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. But a lot of my time has been spent in micro business management and development. And in my final years, most recently that I've just left, I've been a business broker. I really want to thank Bruce and welcome you to this Humanizing the Great Reset. This will be a little bit darker and maybe a little more dense in its presentation. So please bear with me. Life is not so tidy sometimes. Thomas Watson provided Hitler with a process for efficiently killing millions. And I believe moral bankruptcy is imminent when political power, financial profit, and algorithmic overlords are really the process of how we determine and explore our future of work. In his book, Homo Deus, In his book, Homo Deus, Harari states, dataism, and I'm just trying to move something here that will help me read what I'm doing. My apologies. Dataism adopts a strictly functional approach to humanity, appraising the value of human experiences according to their function in data processing mechanisms. If we develop an algorithm that fulfills the same function better, human experiences will lose their value. In his keynote address at Davos this year, he spoke of the threat of the technological disruption and the digital dictatorships that will obliterate jobs as we know them, leading to a growing, what he calls, global useless class. We need strategic alliances to hold our own against this onslaught. Today, I'm presenting some suggested areas to improve a future dashboard for the global useless class. The conservative position tends to hold to these things that maintain a continuity for life. As Neil Postman warns, in our surrender of culture to technology, we often fail to recognize that once a technology is developed, it is permanent and can't be uninvented. Can you imagine Hitler gaining central control as a digital dictator? What priorities would you put then on the future of work? In doing this, I'm looking at starting with an overview of the digital economy lacking coherent value measures or a constitutional framework that represents values of individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. These values and others could provide a moral compass when choosing to work as free people or willing sellouts to a digital dictatorship. Digital dictatorships presently direct government and financial policies, I believe, from algorithms defining safety and sustainability often forcing us to abdicate our personal responsibility and representation. If thugs and radical social, scientific reconstructionists, technological tyrants, banksters, and the like ignore these values for efficiency's sake, we are in trouble. This unfairness and lack of respect for humanity is clear, and it presents a clear and present danger and should be considered in how we negotiate our future. Free speech and constitutional representation must be addressed in our transition in the fourth industrial revolution if we're to maintain our freedom. Interestingly, this year's Davos agenda was focused on creating trust. As we look at the economic development, we might consider Maslow's hierarchy of needs as it points to psychological motivation. I draw to your attention the most often missed level of transcendence, which, as you look at it, refers to the highest and most inclusive needs to make sense of the world and appreciate our oneness. As a Christian, I recognize the importance of this view when looking at the future of jobs in the 21st century, as each of these levels provides a motivational base on characteristics that are distinctly human. While working with people having severe multiple disabilities to educable mental retardation, I used a domains approach that measured individuals' ecological inventory of their world, where they were operating, and targeted activities, tasks, and skill clusters required to normalize and create competencies. We use these domains to empirically measure and socially validate personalized curriculum to create a strategy for training and inclusion. Some of it was along the lines of what we've heard in Ling's presentation when he created jobs for autistic people using an inventory of capabilities and to meet the parental concerns for their child's future. This cursory view of domains is used here just for an example. As we look at social, we see human interaction, social appropriate behaviors, education, development of academic self-directed skills, knowledge, and acquisition. Vocational, well, you can read as we're saying, vocational, and all of these domains, what we're looking at is the broadest way of measuring them and many different ways of measuring them. Recreation is an activity that creates physical and mental health and rejuvenation, personal life skills, communication, reduction of self-harm, and personal well-being. Interesting is a spiritual subset, which is pretty small there, is spiritual. And it is a transcendent domain focused on experiencing love, acceptance, stewardship, and purpose. That's right. Necessities as a measure of sustainability are something that we also may look at to ground ourselves in the way that we look at our world around us. Practically, necessities sustain individual, regional, national, and global economies. These operate in a spectrum from basic survival to creative ventures and jobs that push the limits of our aesthetic creativity. This overview is a cursory introduction to the concept. Food, felt, shelter, clothing were the ones that I based this on, but as we look at food, it would include all aspects of agriculture, food, and the development of sustaining nutrition. Shelter, from sheltering the homeless to technologies that contain and protect what we need to work, live, and play in. Care is a personal cover from physical to social and medical products and services and all those aspects that relate to how we are cared for and need care. Communication, an ability to communicate on all levels from language acquisition to digital media, education, and leadership. Mobility, again, in the broadest measure, from personal ambulation to vehicles that travel autonomously in water, air, and various terrains. From this point of view, we both consume and produce necessities. AI has the ability to structure, measure, and support a simple framework like this and create solutions to increase sustainability, profitability, and even philanthropic activity. Advances have come on the heels of the fourth industrial revolution. The impact of communication, robotics, nanotech, etc., and other new and future category changers is advancing at breakneck speed. The 5 capitals is a framework that provides a holistic view to reflect assets that support adaptability and sustainable development in our future economy. I believe that this model can be simplified in terms of individuals, organizations, infrastructure, finance, and God's creation. Essentially, individuals and organizations invent and provide the direction and development of other capitals, except for, of course, for national capital, which is the source of any morally sustainable potential in future work. How do we measure the success of the great global reset? By definition, reset can mean turning off something to improve its performance, or also mean adoption of new worldviews and relationships to economy in an increasingly digital world that is an anathema to our human value in the future of work. That can be an anathema. I shouldn't have said is. The metrics model presented today represents some potential for dashboards that need to find common ground with organic and strategic alliances to help us participate in planning and developing economic resilience and sustainable economy with fulfilling jobs in Alberta. I appreciate the collaboration of this group as committed to create economic resilience, combining education, business inclusion. People with a variety of disciplines and worldviews need to, I am convinced, participate in organic and strategic alliances and be represented to overcome a potentially draconian reset dominated by the technological disruption that Harari warns of. How do we move forward to sustain abundance that provides an inspired legacy in a world that the fourth industrial revolution presents us? What legacy are we creating? Well, I look forward to Julie's presentation as she answers these questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. Actually, who's next is Laura-Belle Robinson. So we're going to just segue as you pull down your slides, Dale. Maybe Laura-Belle can put hers up.
Laura,
thank you so much, Dale. So again, we said last week, what a fire hose of information. So now we've got Bruce's on all the stats and data behind artificial intelligence, all the different ways of taking a look at sustainability, the holistic look at it. And Laura-Belle, as we get ready for yours.
One second, I'm just trying to figure out why. I was using a number of screens and I've lost.
So maybe Dale, you stop sharing.
I'm working on that right now. I can't find in my Zoom.
Oh no, Claire, can you?
You can back out, Dale, and then come back in. Rather than worry about the technology, why don't you just close your Zoom, back out of Zoom altogether, and then come on back in?
Right on.
That ought to close it. I hope.
Unfortunately, it's not even letting me do that.
Okay.
Technologies, hey?
The joy of technology, obviously not. I'm getting a gallery screen, but no controls. Is it possible for you, Claire, to click to?
I'm not sure how I would get your share off, but I do have on here multiple participants can share simultaneously. So
1 second, I've got it.
There you go.
My apologies.
Okay, wait, share with us. What did you just do?
What happened was this was on another screen that had the images that I was working with to see my way through. I popped up to the top and it literally had the bar that says I could quit sharing it.
Okay.
I was looking here to try to figure that out, but it was just showing me the gallery view.
Just the commitment to continuous learning, that's all. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Laura, you're on.
Screens. So Laura-Belle, we're over to you. And one of the things did you bring some slides, Laura-Belle, and you just get them up?
You're muted.
You're muted, Laura-Belle.
And maybe for the rest of us, if you can take a look in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, just to ensure that you also are muted when the presenters are talking. Laura-Belle, go ahead.
So I've got my slides up, and hold on. I want to share screen. Oh, share.
You got it. You're there.
Okay, so you've got it.
Yes, we do.
So what we're seeing is your layout view.
Okay, so I'm just gonna try to get it larger here. It shrunk again.
What I found with my slides, I could put them in reader view or show view, depending on which.
Okay.
There you go.
There we are.
Okay, over to you, Laura-Belle. I'll let you introduce yourself and your topic.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, welcome to 2121 and the future of work. So, looking back on the 20th century, did our progenitors reimagine and remake the human presence on Earth in ways that work across generations to ensure our children's future? Here, thinking about the future of work, I see an opportunity to begin a deliberate journey into the future, with human and Earth ecology and cultural evolution as the touchstones of human intention. Oops, sorry. Ours is still, here in the 21st century, ours is still a centuries-old economic theory that values people as consumers, users, and in many cases, disposable workers. It's been built on slavery and a class of wage slaves. The emergence of AI begs the question of what will become of those who are replaceable and replaced. Will 2121 be a time when Earth's inhabitants will be wealthy humans and their AI workers and companions? Will Earth still support human life? Unlimited growth is not sustainable. Self-actualization is the highest attainment of humanity in the earliest years. People are self-directing, creative, and imaginative. They're empathetic. Our greatest contribution to a sustainable future is to create the conditions in which each person can thrive. Thankfully, there's a 20th century economic framework that supports that. It's the baby of Oxford University's Kate Raworth, and it is now in play, being adapted by cities, and it's donut economics. The donut in your lower right corner represents the safe and just space for humanity, with indicators to mark crumbling social foundations and the erosion of our planet's ability to sustain life. In this model, economy and ecology are reunited. They're not seen as mutually exclusive. The blueprint of fulfillment was created by a neuroscientist, Dr. Ali Lankarani, and his three foundational pieces are health, wealth, and wisdom. The WHYL factor, HWYL, which stands for how and where you live, that is my piece on top of that. And it's looking at the different stages of human development according through those years, where Dale spoke of transcendence as the ultimate way of being. This is where we look from 50 years upward. So we have until 50 years old to get it right, okay? And then we're hopefully at the place where we can be at that higher consciousness of operating. Yeah, we're not doing well so far. But for the health, the foundational piece, the conceptus, so before baby is born, and then birth to 7 years, those are the parts where that brain is being formed. The foundation of who we will become is being formed in the environment, the culture, the adults, the experiences, the relationships in those places are hugely important in defining what that brain will become and who that person will become. Wealth then is from 8 years to 49 years. And wealth is not about how much money we can amass. It is how we can serve in the world. And it is about our relationships there as well. Then the final stage, that transcendence through wisdom and oneness, the full consciousness, where we are part of that world. This is where the environmental design merges with the economic piece, and we start creating the environment for people to thrive. Every child is the future. When we consider the work of the future, for whom are we working? Our generation's work has to serve a dual purpose: to clean up and repair the damages of our progenitors, and to create a foundation on which our children can build their lives. work can be a job, so a transactional exchange of time for money. It can be a career, something that's more part of an identity, a status builder. And most importantly, as humans, for us, work is critical to the creation of our personal opus. It is central to our becoming the best that we can be. Education, it was Schumacher, economist E.F. Schumacher, who said that education is our greatest natural resource. And we need to think of education outside of schooling and training. Education, when a child starts kindergarten, their brain is set that most of that will be the foundation of who they will become. So the earliest years, and even when the baby is in the womb, those times, the environment, the exposures, the relationships in that world really shape that child's brain and start defining who they will become. And we can operate as being okay with people in survive mode, or we can operate where we want people to thrive. For me, it can be quite simple. So simple actually stands for social, intentional, mental, physical learning environments. The places where we live, work, and play are the places that shape our brain. So if we can deliberately create those environments, we can actually help move humanity along quite nicely. So, Earth in 2121, thinking back to ecology, cultural evolution, and human intention. Earth in 2121. What are parents' greatest challenges? What are their fears? What are their frustrations? How did we in our generation deal with the implications of emerging trends? What interventions did we identify and implement? Did they advance the conditions as we planned? How did we attend to the greatest threat, the health of people and planet? How healthy are the children in 2121? What did we do to best develop our greatest natural resource, the education of our children, the growing of their mind? Did we mend the corrosive fractures and divisiveness in our societies? Did we try? How far did we get? How did we reimagine and remake the human presence on Earth in ways that work across generations? To me, the future of our work is the future by our work. Thank you. That's it for me.
Laura-Belle, we have so much to talk about with all of the three presentations today, plus the three of us that presented last week, plus what Perry's got planned for us next week. So,
Well,
Perry?
what I may have planned for us next week is always dependent upon what is going on this week. And I got to tell you, I mean, I said wow after Bruce. I'd say wow after. I mean, the sequencing of what you put forward was superb. I mean, it really was. Bruce, you set this up extremely well.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I could have Bud Norris pick up what Bruce had to say and what Dale had to say, and Bud typically would. Well, maybe I'll let Bud. Would you butt in? You're out there someplace. Why don't you lead off and maybe pick up, because your viewpoints, which you've expressed in the past, are in essence saying, if mankind is at risk, even though Bruce may say the technology and the algorithms are only going to be aids, not alternatives, Bud has from time to time said, so what? If mankind is coming to an end, why should we be so defensive? Are we all going to be Luddites about the future and let the machines take over if that's the future? Go ahead, Bud. Am I putting words in your mouth, or you're so much more eloquent than I am on this topic? Get rid of you're muted, or if you want to stay muted, there you are. You want to pitch in and give us your viewpoints?
More eloquent? I think not, Perry. That's well down the list of any talents I may have, is being eloquent. And I guess, one of the questions and the not a concern, because I really, whatever comes, it doesn't matter to me. My grandmother at 5 or 10 or 20 years old didn't have the training, the mental training to try and figure out what 100 years was going to mean. And so a lot of these types of discussions, as much as I appreciate, you know, that the speakers have certain values and certain understandings that lead them to where they are, they're not. I guess I don't feel like they're productive for today. And yeah, there's AI. Most of you guys know I've got a bunch of robots. Okay, so it's not like I don't see what Bruce is talking about. It's not that I don't anticipate the real singularity, Bruce, comes with sentience, right? And I don't think we're that far away from that by saying 20, 30 years, wherever. Okay, it's not next week. So I like I say, most of the time I sit and I listen to the philosophical worlds that are imagined, and I guess I don't see a place for Bud Norris in those worlds because of I don't share those philosophies. But I guess I'm trying not to be a contrarian, but at the end of the day, you know, people think different things, and I respect everybody's energy that they put into their topics, and I even understand some of it this week. So, Perry, back to you.
When change is an epidemic, and I don't think there's anyone that would deny that the rate of change, typically driven by technology, and I mean, Bruce, let's take this algorithms as you portrayed them. They're extreme. I mean, they have, in fact, the capability to do much better what mankind has been doing with his pursuit of knowledge. They don't make mistakes. They can create. They're fast. They're global. You can look at that from the perspective of survival of the species and say we're under threat, or you can ask the question, is this the greatest opportunity that mankind has ever faced? And I think it's easy to be a Luddite in the face of all of this. And you know, neither Laura nor Dale took it as a cynic. I think they were trying to say, we can make it through this, but there are things that mankind will need to do in order to continue to see the emergence of technology as an opportunity, not a threat. So let me take the next phase of this discussion today and say, where are in fact the opportunities? Randall, you've been a student of this. Why don't you jump in? And then I'll call on Laura.
Yeah, it depends on the long term or short term. You know, many of us have had these conversations privately, one-on-one. And one thing I'd like to point out is that there's people missing from the room. Could I have a show of hands of everybody who has an IQ of 100 or less? No.
Really, I think we need to redefine intelligence altogether, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, what you know what I mean is we have these educated, intelligent conversations about, but we get the biased opinion that we're all like each other in a way, university educated typically, and yet the people who are really at risk are at the other end of the spectrum. And there's no moral judgment here or anything, or you know, judgment of any kind, but those people definitely who are at the bottom end of the scale, no matter how you look at it, are at most at risk. And so we're being nibbled away at the bottom end here. You know, robots, AI, machine learning are eating away the bottom end in a very broad spectrum. And eventually, I don't think that there's going to be a place for our creativity or our social intelligence, or, you know, we like to think of ourselves as gods or titans, divine beings of some sort with free will. But I believe it is possible that at one point our AI is going to take off and leave us so far in the dust we won't know what happened. It's just a matter of time. And our brains are not designed for understanding, comprehending exponential growth patterns. You know, we basically are linear thinkers, and the reality that we're facing here is non-linear. This is a compounded exponential growth of civil complexity and intelligence. And we are in no way in good form to understand what's really going on here. Bruce's presentation really confirmed maybe some of our worst fears. But at the same time, no, we cannot afford to be Luddites. My biggest concern is, as one of my fellows who invited here, Katrina, is looking into, Katrina Ingram is looking at the ethics of AI and what happens when AI ends up in the hands of a few powerful people.
Okay, so let me interrupt you for a second, Randall, because I just put a note. If I were listening to this conversation today and I was a worm and I had intelligence and the capacity to communicate, I'd probably say, big deal. I mean, worms got replaced. They were at the lowest end of the continuum. And so if we're looking at an evolution, and I think that's really underneath a lot of this discussion is, as the globe has mankind present and mankind is simply on that evolutionary scale, then yeah, the survival of the fittest, or those that are least adaptive, are the ones they're not dying, but they stay in whatever space they happen to occupy and evolve, and we get on with it.
Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, AI, if it becomes actual sentient beings and robots or whatever, or maybe we augment our own intelligence somehow, it is wide open and unpredictable, which creates a great deal of background anxiety for a lot of us because we don't know how we're going to find our way. No matter how smart you are, no matter how talented, no matter how informed, the little brain is designed for, you know, living in the bush with 150 other people.
Okay, Bruce, you want to pick up from there? And I'll come to Laura-Belle. He raised his hand, and Laura, I'm going to jump a bit. Let me hear Bruce has to say.
Yeah, so I think that there's a long-term discussion that's philosophical in nature and really quite interesting. Ultimately, yes, AI will be smarter than us and we'll be the worms, right? So I think that that's, you know, an interesting philosophical future. But I think what we need to do today is recognize that we are in this situation today where technology is creating tremendous change, and what we have to do is plan for tomorrow. And I don't mean plan for 100 years from now. But you know, respectfully, Laura, I think this is a really good discussion. But if we're thinking 100 years from now, we have to start today, right? And today, what are the jobs that are going to happen tomorrow, like right now? What do we need our children to be able to do? What kinds of courses should our universities have right now today? Because, you know, most of the education that is even taking place today, and even what our children are educated for in high school, most of that will not be 100% relevant when, you know, all of those jobs that people are trained for are just simply not, you know, employable, right?
Okay, and I think you had a slide that talked about the skills, which to some extent will help frame the curriculum for today, for tomorrow. Like we need curriculum today for tomorrow, and in the future of work, we need to understand the relationship of education as it exists for how we shape tomorrow, which is through our kids or through the younger people. That list, interestingly enough, echoes something that I saw a few years ago. I got very concerned about all of what we're talking about a few years ago, and I asked universities and colleges what they were doing in anticipation of knowledge becoming so free-flowing and not enabling them to be competitive with one another, because everybody would have it. And it was McMaster University that developed a new selection criteria for medical faculties. And it included relational skills, that it wasn't the people that were top of the class anymore they were looking for exclusively. They wanted to find students and began to develop a curriculum that took into consideration what Dale talks about, which is the subject matter was a human being, not simply imparting of knowledge, but to be sensitive to who the human being was, which I call personalization. So your list was really a list of relational skills that the computer will take a while in getting to because it hasn't got emotional strength, at least not for starters, saying that human beings in the immediate future need to develop a stronger base of relational skills. Okay, take it from there, either Dale or Laura. Laura, you jump in there.
Okay, so I have a bunch of things now because everyone who spoke actually said something relevant to what I wanted to say. So first of all, the 100 years. The only billionaire I have ever met, and he was kind enough to sit down with me for 20 minutes, all of his companies have a 100-year business plan. And when he said that in his presentation, I thought, okay, I need to talk to this man, because how do you do a 100-year business plan and not have everything go crash and burn as the world changes? And so he sat down and sketched it out for me, and it is really quite brilliant and actually quite simple, because it sets you up to be able to respond, because you're always in connection with what you can do in the moment and what you have in reserve. So you can adapt. Actually, nothing takes you by surprise to the point where you can't do something. Then for me, when I speak about designing from the future or forward building, I am thinking specifically about our children. I had an opportunity to review a textbook for Ontario Education, their geography program. And I got to page 30 in that textbook, and I called the publisher and I asked who wrote this. And it was a retired teacher and everything. So this is in about 10 years ago, and everything in there was from the 1950s and 60s. And that was going to be the textbook for these grade 9 students. So already we're putting them behind what's happening. Then we have the way we're building neighborhoods. It's really important that our children learn how to have relationships. It's very important for them to get what's needed to feed their little brains if they're going to make it in the future. For me, it's very simple. What happens at the kitchen table? What happens in the yard? What happens in their neighborhood? That's where it's all going to come to be. Our parents right now, our cities in the 20th century was urbanism on steroids. It's how far can you go out? How many cars can your kid go into in one day? Well, what happens to a little child who is in a car from the morning to go to daycare, then from daycare to the grocery store, then back, and so on? All of that time in the car, two things happening. One, they are not grounded. They're not rooted in any place. By the time they're 8 years old, they're showing signs of transience. The other thing that's happening to them is that their brain development is now equivalent to a person who is a long-term user of marijuana. So in those earliest years, that little brain isn't getting what it's going to need. When that child becomes a teenager, we look at today's life of how the epidemic in teenage suicide and mental health problems. Those are seeded by the time those children are 4 years old. My world is, I can do without the adults, thank you very much, unless they're willing to step up and work for these children to get the children what they need. The basic needs are not being met, even in the wealthier neighborhoods.
So what are those? I mean, when one speaks of basic needs, one can get into Maslow's hierarchy and talk about security and food and shelter. In Finland and several places of the world, they're not sending kids to school till they're 8.
Exactly.
They're saying what's important is the development of relational skills,
Yes.
the development of play. The book, The Last Child in the Woods, is all about giving children an adequate foundation for building self-esteem, building strong relational skills, and be ready to confidently go out into the world instead of being locked up in a kindergarten or a classroom where they are robots from age 5.
Yeah, and their days are scheduled down to the last minute.
So
they don't have the freedom. They don't have because the brain is forming based on on what the child is experiencing and the people who are in the environments with that child. So when I'm asked to design a playground, it doesn't have any playground equipment in there. It's to shove them into a garden, an overgrown garden, where they can run and play. Nothing is prescriptive. Everything is just as they imagine it, to imagine how to use it.
Are you familiar with the book, The Last Child in the Woods?
Yes, and
Yeah.
also the research that came out of the, I think it was in Finland, there was a massive international conference on the child, and McMaster University represented Canada at that, because they have the early childhood development section there that's quite well known globally. And some very, very important pieces came out of that we are trying to build. So we're trying to get this into neighborhood planning so that we can start getting these children into the environments that they need right at home. I mean, COVID was a blessing in the case that it kept people at home. So people started discovering their neighborhoods. We started planting gardens and creating places for children to have adventure as they walk down the street. Children are fascinated by little things. It doesn't have to be big.
I have a slightly different perspective about that, and that is, although nature's really, really important, intelligence is really important. And you can get a certain amount of intelligence by looking at nature, but what you need is you need to be cognitively challenged. And so our children so this is why video games are so important. We need more video games. Now we need video games of a particular nature, and those are video games that encourage creativity, encourage leadership, encourage cognitive processing, encourage communication, because most of the time that our children are going to spend, and I have 4 children, and they spend, their work is almost entirely online, and my work is almost entirely online. And so many are going to be, highly online oriented. And the kinds of skills that you need are going to be oriented in that way.
Well, this is very interesting. Just a second, because this contrasts. We've got this battle. There's the development of mankind as a humanist, which is the relational skills that are fundamental, and then there's what you bring forth, the need for technical skills in order to survive in a technical world. Are these two things not in conflict? How do we weave these together?
I don't think they're either. I'm going to,
Go ahead,
my turn.
Yeah.
I'm speaking up here. I'm barging in here. Thank you. I really like what both of you have said, both Laura and Russ. We do not have to have the exclusion of cerebral education and human to human contact and relationships. They do not have to work in exclusivity. But in terms of practical, I really want Bud to feel more hopeful about what's happening here. We're all online in the next iteration of meetings and communications here. All of these 30 people online, we're doing this. We are learning our way through, and we will survive and we will prosper. But I want you to remind this group that, as a very specific example, certainly of what Russ is talking about in terms of, your
get people butting in.
I'm talking about your younger brother, I guess, right? Bruce, sorry about that, Bruce. But in terms of the online world, the virtual educational world and meetings world, it's I'm going to be talking specifics here. It's $1 trillion business that we are right in the middle of. By 2027, you can think about $13.1 billion being used in terms of online education. And right now I'm looking at 4 companies who raised in the last year or two, $133 million for virtual conferencing and meetings online. This is where we're going to be headed for. It's a hybrid. We want to see each other and hug each other and say hello and that kind of thing at an in-person seance that Barry hosts. But we also need to get really good at what this whole new world is all about. And, again, what Bruce was talking about is not so much gaming, Bruce, but it's more gamification. and how we apply the world of gamification to learning for Laura's children that she's talking about. Have you heard about Clubhouse, you guys?
Yeah.
In the last 1 year, 2 million visitors on that. It's the next Zoom, but from the audio perspective. If you haven't heard about Clubhouse, you're going to be hearing about Clubhouse.
The Clubhouse or Flophouse?
Clubhouse, Perry.
Clubhouse, okay. No, I'm just taking notes. Remember, I have a hearing issue now at my age. So go ahead.
Anyway, I just wanted to leave that and say, you know what, we really are, we have got more hope, I think, to look forward to. This is not an end of the world scenario that we are in here, but we are moving quick. We are moving fast. And we are needing to pay attention, of course, to, I think, you know, the great outdoors. Thank you, Laura, for that. But we cannot leave what Bruce is talking about off the table.
No, go ahead, Laura, because I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's exclusive. Go ahead.
No, it's not. And in fact, both are very equally important. Now, for someone who lives out in the country around trees and so on, that's no problem. But a lot of my clients, my little people, are in cities. They are in downtown cores where everything is paved over and glass and steel. So nature for them is something they don't see on a regular basis. And so to bring that back into downtown areas is quite important, not just for the children, but for the adult mental health as well. The other piece with that was, I lost it there. But it was something that Sharon was talking about.
The vehicle for learning. She talked about online and how we're in a virtual space.
Yeah.
Perry, can I say something?
Just give Laura just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
She
So yeah, I'll just wrap it up. One of the things. Coding. So in Finland, little munchkins are learning coding, how to code for computers and so on, but they don't have a computer in front of them. They're learning it with knitting needles, knit and purl being the 1 and the 0, right? And so you don't have to have money to buy a computer for you to start coding at the age of 4.
Huh.
Okay.
Knit and purl remind me of the spinning wheel, which takes us back to the, never mind, the lottery. Go ahead, BK. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that, you know, kids these days, they have cell phones, they have PCs. We human beings are basically lazy, okay? We can spend 24/7 looking at stuff on the internet and not make, you know, lying in our bed. And I really worry about the kids. What are they gonna do?
Well, we have talked about the fact that if things evolve, as Bruce notes, and as Dale maybe fears, and as Laura acknowledges, there are going to be people left behind. One of the discussions that shows up in the newsletter and is the commentary that has come up from a few people is the guaranteed annual income, recognizing that there may well be no work for some, at least work as we have known it, not muscle work and not brain work and maybe not creative work.
But can I butt in again?
They become the worms of the future. Yeah, go ahead, BK.
Okay.
So what?
The government is giving money to people sit around at home and do nothing. Let's create jobs so that they have to go out there and do some work. Some people are making more money sitting at home than they used to when they were working. The government is throwing money away.
Bismarck in Germany, which takes you back to the 1800s, said, dig a hole, fill a hole. A lot of what Canada is doing through its government in the distribution of CERB money, et cetera, is giving people enough money so they can survive without regard to whether they do anything productive.
They don't have to dig a hole.
So government doesn't seem to have a problem with people necessarily being non-productive. What we're talking about everything from survival of the species to preparing kids so they in fact can be social. Whether they're productive or not is not fundamentally the issue. It's, are they relational? Are they able to get along with one another? Can we have a community? Can we have a family? Can we have social elements that keep human beings working with one another productively or otherwise. Gerald,
I don't think the kids
Gerald,
have.
okay, just a second. Gerald, you're
Yeah,
brand new
yeah,
to the
yeah.
family. You and I have had a chat. Gerald Jackman, he's from Calgary. Gerald, you and I have had some offline conversations in preparation of today. What do you want to add to this conversation?
Oh, I was wondering when you're going to rope me. There's so many avenues of discussion that could take place over extended periods of time on these subjects. You know, I mean, there's always, in my view, there's choice. I mean, the human variable is the hardest variable to deal with. So, you know, there's always choice. So, you know, we are here today by choice. So in making that choice, we are attempting to understand our future more definitively, whether that be a 1-year plan or a 100-year plan.
Actually, I think we're here to drink, but go ahead.
Well, I did like that one slide that had the food represented as a bundle of grapes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But my point is really that you know, when we have choices, and so who's making the choices for us? Are we making the choices as individuals? Are we making the choices to assign and proxy out those choices to an AI entity? How are we making those choices? So it's I know that, you know, you very quickly start to get into the politics of dancing in the answer to some of the answers to this question, your question, because, you know, I don't trust the people that are making those choices for us, right? And guiding some of the process. And so, you know, the best thing I can do is understand how I can make some of those choices and work within a community like this one. Of conversation and become aware of what options I have available to me in the greater scheme of things.
I'm going to pick up Ling, you've turned your back on me for a second. I got a question for you. Laura-Belle was referring to businesses that have 100-year plans. One of the features of China has always been that they're in for the long haul. They think long, that the whole civilization has been built not on the immediacy, but recognizing that there is a long future. Am I wrong, or have I got the wrong schooling? Can you tell me at all about the Oriental culture and how it's playing out?
So in Oriental thinking, there's always a long-term plan. So this a famous story in the old days. When grandpa, you know, wants to go out, there's a mountain in front of him. So instead, you know, try to do something. He says, I'm going to decide to start dig the mountain out. If I can finish, my grandson's going to finish it. So eventually they dig the mountain out, they open the road. So that's the thinking they have. In the Chinese community, or in the Chinese current system, there's always something they call a 100-year plan, 50-year plan. So I've been talking to a lot of you know, deputy ministers, and I asked them, what is your job? What do you do? I'm surprised learning most of the office I learned from Canada is a firefighter. They're doing nothing but firefighter in China. Most of the boss, like when I was working in China, my boss's job, his job is really working on 5-year plan, executing 5-year plan, prepare the next 5-year plan. And his job, his boss's boss is working on the bigger plan at the divisional level, at the university level, at the district level, at the city level. And that's how they're actually doing things. So that's one thing, thinking I have. The second thing I've been surprised, really, we've been talking about the changes, everything else, but we never really talk about the force behind the change. The force, which what I mean by the force is what is being driven everything in the society, in the Western, in the Easterns, everything's driven. The ideologic and how we're going to force this change, we never really had a discussion about that. I think it's something to be considered. Now, talk about generations. We are so worried about our 100 years generation. I can tell you the history is already there. 150 years ago, when the motor engine start, invent, I'm pretty sure all the farmers going to be jumping upside down. Holy shit, look at that thing, it's going to replace my job. I won't have a future anymore. Well, we're here 150 years later, we still have the future for the human beings. I think we'll worry about too much. I think 150 years later, we're always going to find a way with surviving based on the technology innovations. I still remember when I was a little kid, my dad always tell me, your generation will never have a future. Well, I'm doing just fine. And my wife is complaining about my son. I tell my wife the same. You don't need to worry about it. Their generation is going to find a way. They're going to do much better than you are. Like my 21 years old already published his first book. I asked my wife, have you done that? If you've not done that, you shouldn't worry about it. So I think there are something I like to suggest our group is not only talk about the surface, maybe we should look at more deeper and the driving force. Maybe we should look at a comparison, compare other systems to see how other people is doing. I'm not saying advocating China is doing better. Obviously, they have their own problems. But I think the system can learn from each other. That's my 2 cents.
So learning from one another, where in fact there are what one might call best practices. Sharon, you touched on this when you talked about we are today learning how to use this technology. We're learning how to continue to relate to one another, how to grow and how to learn with online learning, online conferencing, virtual. We can connect to the entire globe and we can connect to people worldwide. Maybe we should spend some time looking at techniques that are being used today to enable people to remain connected. You want to pick up on that, Sharon? We can't hear you.
Perry, can I be selfish?
No, not. Yes, you can, but after Sharon's done. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yes, and it takes time for change. There's no doubt about it. I've been working in the digital marketing side of things now for almost 14 years and 10 years full time. And some of the materials that I started working with 10 years ago, only now are being picked up as being something that would be commonplace. So it does take time, but it means an attitude change, I think, a mindset change to say, looks like Zoom is going to be part of my everyday life here for the next while. Maybe we need to get really accustomed to how to use the technology. Not that the technology is the be all and the be all at all, but it is the human to human that we need to always start from. And then what technology or what system do we use in order to enable that to happen better? So, yeah.
Well, we've experienced, and I cited this in the newsletter in the last week, an evaluation, maybe not an evaluation, a revolution, maybe not a revolution, people expressing pain about online learning.
Yep.
We saw students getting to general faculty council at a local university, not being particularly well received, complaining about the system as it's functioning today, without a lot of sensitivity to what individuals are going through in online learning, which they are claiming isn't working.
Well, this is an anomaly. I mean,
they're not dismissing online learning, but they're saying, if this is the way of the future, if this is what education is having to do during COVID, and will likely have to do after it's over, we got a lot of learning to do at the supplier end because the receiver isn't getting what they expect.
That's exactly right. And I do know my tech friends, my techie friends, most of them live in a bubble. I mean, they think the entire world is doing the same thing that they are doing and that it is easy. The phrase, just do this, I'm going to frame in a picture and put it on my wall. No, it's not just do this, my bubble friends. It's really, we need to bring on the human race alongside us, and that will take time. That will take another generation.
But Bruce, I'm going to pick up on Bruce here because Bruce has a vehicle called algorithms, which should be able to almost personalize instruction and say, we need to completely transform and move away from supply management, which has always been about the union, the teacher, who is in short supply. But now we have the capability of saying, hey, wait a minute, we don't have short supply anymore. We got plenty of supply. In fact, we even have algorithms that can monitor your learning styles and look at whatever content you particularly need. Laura-Belle brings us our lifetime experiences, and Bruce brings us whatever it is we need to learn, and it's personalized. Is that fanciful, or are we very close to that?
I think what you're, looking at emerging AI algorithms, think about AI that's learning about you. And
exactly.
It's watching what you learn, and what it's actually doing is it's figuring out what you have problems with, and then responding to that. And it's learning which information, how you learn best, what material is the best material for you. There's a role that AI can play, and in fact, in enhancing our individual knowledge and enhancing our individual capabilities.
Okay, but is that utopian? I mean, this sounds so fanciful and so true. How far off is it?
Yeah, the other side of it is that there's basically people that recognize technology and the value of it, and there's people that reject it. And I can tell you that in the world today, people that are recognizing it and embracing it and using it, they're getting the jobs, and everybody else is getting nothing. Their jobs are, they don't get paid. They get paid, or they have no jobs, or if they are in a job, it's a job that doesn't pay anything.
Okay, so that takes us back to a couple episodes. We had our seminars on the digital economy and who's playing, who's not. If education has the capability of using these algorithms, and universities are rejecting the appeals that students have about what's work, our institutions are becoming the Luddites of the future.
Well, I think that our universities might be doing it wrong, perhaps. There are some programs that are extremely successful, some massive, massively online, courses that have hundreds of thousands of students. And so we see that, and we see some, like Khan Academy, where they're actually, have massive resources and they're continually refining their tools. We see that emerging. I think there's some amazing local companies in Alberta that actually are doing education, for businesses, and they're doing amazing work. So I think this is going to evolve. I think the universities are having a huge problem transitioning to this new environment, because their business model was, was not that, right? Even though, of course, they had to educate these students, they had to do research, and they had to do all these other things. And I think that there's a transition period happening for universities.
Are they? I mean, from what I saw, and at least reported by the students through Gateway and the Edmonton Journal, is if that is an example of what's taking place, the universities are defensive, because they're defending the teacher without regard to listening to the reason they existed in the first place was not for the teacher at $300,000 a year at the university, but for the student. So is the revolution what we thought took place in the age of reason and humanism became relevant? Or is it taking the 2021 before we finally realize that the professions and the institutions were established for people and that they are important?
Yeah, well, that's exactly the question. Why have a university prof who's great at research but terrible at teaching, responsible for teaching 200 students some subject, and he's boring and he's awful?
Right.
Right. Well, why not just have an AI teach the class?
So let the universities transition to becoming research centers. Let them be research centers. God, we wouldn't want half of them in community anyway. Let them be locked up in their keeps as researchers, and get the hell away from being teachers, and let the teachers do the teaching, which are probably the algorithms which have access to knowledge and can actually do the emotional assessments of the individuals to give it to them in the style that they need. Is this a revolution or just tomorrow?
They should research teaching. That's what they should do.
If I can quickly say, one of the things I loved most about the Khan Academy, so I tried to decide if I could learn computing science. So I went to Khan Academy to learn that, and it was doable. But the thing I loved about Khan Academy was that you could do the lessons at whatever pace you are. So for somebody who's in a subject area that they're really acing, they can just rip right through it and not be held back because they're in some class that you have to go through X number of months, right? So it was very much more self-directing for the individual.
So if I had the Alberta Teachers Union or I had a national union listening in on this conversation, would they be embracing this new future, or would they be afraid that their members are going to be challenged? Because the best teacher, which may be the algorithm, or it may be a teacher who's been assessed as really having the capacity to connect the students, maybe we don't need 1,500 students, maybe teachers, maybe we need 1 or 2 or 5.
There's the question of relevancy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, when you can get all the learning that you need from AI and online resources that are universally accessible around the world, then what's the relevancy of local institutions?
So what McMaster discovered when they did the research about the future of medicine and said relational skills become increasingly important, the doctors and the dentists and the teachers and the engineers of the future are the ones with the strong relational skills that have access to that knowledge. So the algorithm becomes an aid to those that have great relational skills. Am I getting it wrong?
Oh, I agree with you. It's 5:30 though, but it's
oh crap! Damn it. Oh, this is good. Okay. Well, how many hands? Tom, keep it quick. Go ahead.
Yeah,
you're not gonna let me speak?
No, just hang on a second. I really recommend that book, Grasp.
Send me the book.
This guy's an MIT professor.
I will include it in the next newsletter as an incentive to read the newsletter. Okay, it is 5:30, and it's exciting to see that as many hands go up as have. I am going to ask for a show of hands. Should online learning and the future of education, or education in crisis, be the theme for next week? How many feel comfortable with that?
I think that's a great topic.
Okay, terrific. It is a transition. I do beg you to read my fucking newsletters, though.
Perry, can I just say something?
Go ahead, you wrap it up.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. I'm very excited and very happy that I came back to this thing. Today's presentation was spectacular, but I'm going to digress.
Okay, you're done. You just digressed, but we're done. Next week, we'll give you the lead. I will ask you to come up with the first question next week.
Okay. All right then. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This really was exciting. It's getting better. Let your friends know. Thanks, Bruce. See you next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.